Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Diary of a Psychic Medium with me, Amber Amrine. Today, Dr. Lotte joins us to dive into near-death experiences and her incredible stories having them. We discuss the deeper fabric of ancestry, the overlap of spirituality and science, the mystery of destiny, and so much more. Here we go. Alrighty, jumping right on in, Dr. Lotte Valentine, NMD, is an author, evidential psychic medium, medical medium, and ancestral healer. She is the award-winning author of Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul, and a sought-after international speaker. She also hosts the podcast Dr. Lotte Science with Soul. This is such a fun convo. Buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Can you share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes. I've had a kind of a roller coaster life. So I was born and raised in Northern Europe in Sweden, and I moved to the United States when I was 21, married an American. And then I completed my studies at Boston University on the East Coast. And I majored in business and computer science. And so my first job was actually with IBM in Westchester County, New York. And I was a programmer and a systems analyst. And then I had my first child, and it was so difficult. This is in the 1980s to get a babysitter or a nanny or somebody. We got a nanny, it didn't work out, and we found a babysitter, but she could only do it a short time. So eventually, 6 months later, after juggling this for a while, I said, that's it. Like, I'm just going to take a leave of absence. So then I had another child, and we got moved to California. And then I had a third child. And it was after the third child was also born in the middle of the Landers earthquake. So, and I know you're from, right? Between the 7.4 and the 7.2 earthquake. And I think they later downgraded it to like a 7.3, but the newspaper clippings we have from that day is, we saved it for our daughter, said 7.4. And it was one of those times in my life when I thought I was going to die because we lost all the power in the hospital. The hospital was built on rollers, so it was just like rolling back and forth. And
what a story.
It was rough. And there were windows, those big windows from floor to ceiling. And everybody was just leaning over me. I was, close to giving birth. I was contracting maybe 3 minutes apart. So the labor was moving on, and everybody was just holding on for their life. All the metal instruments on the trays were just levitating up and down. And eventually I gave birth, and then we had a 7.2 earthquake. And then I hemorrhaged after birth. So then what happened is that I was hemorrhaging 10 days later, and I went to the ER. They sent me home. I saw the doctor. They sent me home. And they kept telling me that, oh, it's just a second lining. This is 1992. There were no tests done, no imaging, not even a lab draw to see if there's an infection, what's going on. And so eventually, after bleeding, I had 3 huge blood clots come out. And we went back to the ER after, this is the third day this is happening. And so this is the beginning of how my story completely changed from being a very analytical person, very materialistic. I did not believe in anything. I was confirmed when I was 14 because I was born and raised in Sweden. And back in the day, the state and the church were not separated. It was this. We went to the church to get a passport. So
oh, wow.
It was the different times. And so most of us were confirmed. And I did not believe, I didn't believe in anything they were teaching me. I didn't believe in the spirit world. I didn't believe in angels. I didn't believe in anything. My life was very black and white. My father was a physician. I had 3 older brothers. My mom was a hospital floor administrator. And it was just, every day they talked about medicine. And so it either is or it isn't, right? So there I was, went back to the ER. And again, they did like a visual inspection. They said, well, you're not bleeding that much now, so we're just going to leave you for observation again, right? They left me. I didn't even have a bell to ring. And eventually a nurse comes to check on me. And this is like literally divine intervention. Because if this nurse had not checked on me during that 1 minute, I might not have been here today. So, I mean, my memory is just this nurse opens the door and I started bleeding again. And I'm just thinking, well, I'm glad I'm finally bleeding in the ER so they don't send me home. And her jaw, I mean, it was just pure terror on her face. And I can hear the call on the loudspeaker, OBGYN, stat to the ER, OBGYN, stat to the ER. And then she quickly cleaned up the mess, put new papers down. And within 30 seconds, this middle-aged doctor came running in full speed. I mean, completely out of breath. I'm sure he ran across the hospital. And a younger physician in tow. And he said, what's going on? And I said, this is the third day I'm bleeding. And I've been here, 2 days ago, but they keep sending me home. I saw the doctor. And he said, okay. So he understood, was the first one who really understood how much I had been bleeding and nobody had done anything. So again, they said, okay, let's start by taking a look. And as they're examining me, another huge blood clot comes out. I mean, these were like the size of a man's large fist or a newborn baby's head. I mean, we're talking enormous blood clots. And this is not the fifth time I'm hemorrhaging in 3 days, that amount of blood. So after that happened, I just felt I was just sinking. And I tried to sit up and say, I'm not feeling too good. And he pushed me down on the bed and I could hear the room filling with staff, but I couldn't really keep my eyes open at that point. So everybody comes in and I have a nurse on my right that has put a blood pressure cuff on my right arm. I have a nurse on my left trying to place an IV. And I feel like I jumped out of an airplane without a parachute. So I just feel like I'm falling, free fall. And I'm thinking, what's taking her so long? But now I understand, you go into shock. Now your veins start collapsing. So it's really hard to access your veins. So as I'm lying there, the nurse at my right yells out 50 over 15, hurry. And that's my blood pressure. And I still feel like I'm just falling. And it was shortly after she yelled that, and in a very panicked kind of voice, that I knew that I was dying. And that was such a different experience from the experience I had when I was giving birth, when I thought I was going to die. Like, we're all going to get buried in the rubble. The windows are going to cave in, or the ceiling is going to cave in. And you're in this big, big earthquake. And this was very different because I had knowledge of the fact that I was dying at that point. So here I am on this table in the ER. So what do? I say to myself, well, if anything was true, what they taught me when I was 14, if there is a God, if there is anything out there, this is my only hope now because I'm in the process of dying. So I said, please, God, please let me live. I have 3 children under the age of 6. I had a boy that just turned 6 a few days earlier. I had a 3.5-year-old boy and a newborn baby girl. And as soon as I had said that, I was pulled out of my body. And I found myself kind of floating a few feet above the body. But in this state, I mean, the first thought, I mean, this is what's so funny to me now, because you're still there. You are still the same person. When we are in our bodies, we just kind of identify with our body and who we are. But when you're outside your body, you are still you, the same person. It's like your body is just a house. So think of it. You live in an apartment or you live in a house. You get in the car, you drive to the grocery store, right? You just exit your apartment or your house. When you exit your car and then you get back in your car, it's the same thing. The soul just sort of steps out. The body is just the house. It's just where you live while you're here. So when you're outside the body, you're still you. You're still the same person. And you still think, right? And so my first thought was, how can I be outside my body and still be me? How does this work? Because it wasn't any of my belief systems. But also there was no time on the other side. And I had the knowledge that there was no time, and time didn't matter in this state. And you could access past, present, and future all at the same time. And it drove me crazy for years because I was like, how could there be no time? Now, please, somebody explain this to me. And, of course, the unconditional love, and it's just peace. And you don't really worry so much about, when I was in my body, it's like, I can't die. I'll have to be here for my kids. And then you're outside your body. You're like, wow, whoa, this is nice. What a nice, pleasant experience to be outside my body. So it's it's like all those worries go away. Now you're just kind of existing without those fears and worries. So I get pulled. Luckily they saved me, and I get pulled back into my body. And then I wake up the next day, and as I'm lying in the hospital room, in the hospital bed, I'm still, contemplating how could I be outside my body the day before. And I hear my sister-in-law. She's in the left corner of my ceiling, and she says, "Everything is going to be okay." I'm like, yesterday I was outside my body. Now I think I hear the spirit world. If I tell anyone, they're going to think I'm absolutely a nutcase, and they're going to lock me up in the psych ward. So, I was just keeping everything under wraps. And the nurse came in and she said, and she was probably aware, or she might have been present the day before. And she said, "Did anything unusual happen yesterday in the ER?" And I'm like, "No, nothing unusual happened." I was just petrified of, telling her anything that had happened, because I was like, they're going to lock me up in the psych ward. So then they sent me home, and my parents changed. I was so sick because we ended up not doing a blood transfusion, because I pleaded with the doctor, and I was only 34 at the time. I was in perfect health. I just gotten a degree in nutrition. And I said to the doctor, he said, "We have to give you a blood transfusion." And I said, "Well, is there any way around it?" Because a lot of people that got blood transfusions back in the early 90s ended up with AIDS. So we didn't have a good understanding of that yet. And I said, "I have 3 kids under the age of 6. The last thing I wanted to find out is that I have AIDS 5 years from now." So he said, "All right, well, we're gonna see how quickly you make blood." So they measured, okay, your hemoglobin's going up, and and he said, "You're not gonna feel too good for a couple of months, but we're gonna send you home with all these supplements and medications and who knows what." So I pretty much slept for the first 2 or 3 months. And when my mother-in-law took over, coming to help out until I could sit up in a rocking chair by myself, she said, "What happened in the ER?" And I told her, and she said, "Oh, what you had is called a near death experience." And then she went out and she bought the book, Life After Life by Raymond Moody. And that's how my journey began, with a near death experience. And then I got really sick. I had bone marrow suppression, and I was covered in bruises, and I kept getting pneumonia. And it was a struggle. And it really took about 6 years until I could go to the grocery store without passing out, or just abandoning my cart, and or sitting down on the shelf in the store putting my head down. It was quite the struggle. And it was during the time when I went through, healing from the bone marrow suppression, had a second near death experience. And again, I kind of laugh at it, because I don't know how I would have felt about the second, if I had the second experience right up front, because I did not have a viewpoint that could support those experiences. So it's almost like I had to process it for 2 years before I could have my second experience. And the second experience is very different, from my first, and it's really what has become my life work today. So during the second experience, I get pulled out of my body, and I go to this place that I call the mid station, because there was an awareness that it's like different levels. So if you go into a skyscraper, and there's 100 floors, and you get off on the 50th floor, there's floors above you. There's floors below you. But you don't know what's on those floors. You're on the 50th floor, right? So it was that kind of a feeling, as if I call it the bouncing station, because they sent me back. And I've heard other people tell these stories, and they're like, "I had a choice. I could stay if I wanted." That was no choice. It's like, you're going back. So I get to this place, and I hear the most beautiful music, like music you can't make on the earth plane. And I tried. We had a huge synthesizer at the time, and I tried every single sound, probably over 200 sounds. There was not one sound that was as beautiful as the music. And I tried so hard to recreate it. And I've heard other people that have heard that music and have tried to recreate it and have made music from that. It's close, but it's not it, right? It's because it's almost as if you can't make it on this plane, because it's more beautiful than that. And so I'm wondering where the music is coming from. So I look to my right, and I see this little log cabin, and it literally looks like a Swedish sauna, right? So this little tiny log cabin. I open up the door, I look inside, but it's empty. So I'm like, why? Why is it empty? Where is this music coming from? So I look to my left, and I see this, like a mirror image of what I'm seeing on the right. And again, it's empty. But then the bright white light comes in. And the best way I can explain this is anybody who has been in a dense fog, the fog that just kind of rolls in and then everything gets quiet and you're just surrounded, you're standing in the middle of that fog. It was like that, but it was the brightest, whitest light you can imagine. And this bright light is just pure unconditional love. And as I'm turning around in this light, I see an outline of angels. But again, I am also aware of the fact that, well, I don't believe in angels, but I'm seeing the silhouette of these angels. And the music is coming from the angels. And the light, I mean, the light itself, you can call it whatever you want. I call it source because I don't like to say God because I get stuck in a religion. And I feel like there's always a problem with all religions in one way or another. There is no perfect religion. And the religion, the books that we have, people wrote those books. People decided what goes in those books, right? And when you look back thousands of years, we used to worship goddesses and things like that. So it's, we have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt of the teachings that are in there. So I call it source because we all come from source. We are all part of source. Our consciousness is part of source. We carry that light within us. It's like we all have like a little spark of light, like imagine lighting a match and you carry that light within you. We all have that. We all have that spark. We all came here for a reason. And I know it doesn't feel like that for many people, right? I feel very blessed because I feel like I know what my reason is. But I didn't in the first half of my life. It was just, I was just walking along. But we're all part of that. We all carry that light of unconditional love within us. And then there are two spirit guides, and the one on the right says to the one on the left, what is she doing here? She has to go back, right? As if I'm going to say there is some kind of time limit on how long you can be outside. Maybe if you're outside too long, you get stuck on the other side. I don't know. But it was just, I felt that kind of like you have to go back. Like we need to get her back. And right away I said, no, wait a second. How can I be outside my body and still be me? How does this work? I've spent over 2 years pondering this, driving me absolutely nuts. Like, it's not supposed to be this way, but this is my experience, right? And the guide on my left said, well, if I told you, you wouldn't remember. So, and I've heard other people talking about the wiping mechanism that, you don't get to remember everything. And then he says, but you will remember this. And then it was as if I was standing on the moon and I was looking down on the earth. But around the earth was what I called at the time, because this is 1994. We did not yet have a good Google in place. What I called it the silvery, glittery fishnet. Because I grew up in Sweden and it has an archipelago, 24,000 islands outside Stockholm, which is the capital. So in the summers, I spent time on the island that my grandmother had bought a big section of. And there was no electricity, there was no running water. And we laid fish nets in the ocean to help feed the family. And so as a little kid, I'm like 6 or 7 years old, I got my big orange life vest on. I'm rowing this boat for my grandmother. And when she lifts the fish nets out of the ocean, the water droplets on the fish net is like diamond shaped, right? That's what it looked like. It looked like a silvery, glittery fishnet. Now we can just Google grid around the earth. It's so simple, right? But back then we couldn't. I mean, I searched the whole San Francisco Public Library for this when we lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. After a while, I just gave up. Like, what was that? What did I see? What is it? How does this work? I couldn't find any information. And so eventually I just gave up. And then Google came. So, and with that information, I got sent back. But that's also, what has propelled me through life and what my work has become today.
My dad would love to chat with you. When he was 7, he had a stroke and has a full recollection of dying. He saw the white light. He saw his family members. And he remembers talking to this giant sun or something like that, which he associated as being source energy or some sort of God. And he was having this argument saying, I'm not ready to go. Like, I have a long life to live. I'm not ready to go. And this being kept saying, no, it's your time to go. And he said that they argued for what felt like a few days or something like that. There was this intense argument, and he was finally able to come back into his body. He was in a coma for a week following his stroke, and he remembers like jumping around and
Mhm.
like looking at everyone. Nobody could hear him or see him, but yeah, and he almost received this download of like, I don't know why we're here, just all of these wise reasons for existence and these deep concepts and stuff like that. And then he's brought back into his body. He had to learn how to walk, how to use the bathroom by himself, how to eat. Like it took months for him to um, rehab his body. And it was so hard for him because adults don't listen to a child, especially in the or how, when was this? This is maybe in the 70s. You know, if this child has all of this like wise
Mhm.
wisdom, same thing, like, oh, time doesn't exist. It's like they're not going to listen to the kid.
Yeah.
And it was such a struggle for him
Yeah.
to acclimate back into human life. Yeah, but he loves speaking with others that have also gone through similar experiences just to like compare details.
Yeah.
I love the significance of this earthquake. I feel like just the cinematography of like this earthquake while you're getting ready to birth, there's something so powerful about it. Almost like these deeper, I don't know, earth codes or something like shaking up and almost like forcing this process to happen in your body.
Mhm.
This is kind of a weird question and I'm not sure how to ask it. Did your relationship with the planet change? Because it's almost like you and the earth were going through some sort of shift at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything shifted. You know, why we're here, what am I doing here? Um, all of a sudden, everything just shifts. So you have a deeper understanding that everything is, interconnected, number one. Everything that we do, everything that we say, every vibration, all our thoughts, the trees, the plants, right? People say, oh, you have a green thumb, wow, look at your plants. Yeah. They talk to their plants. What am I going to say? They water their plants. They baby their plants. Yeah, that's why they have a green thumb. And how many experiments do we have now on talking to the plants? I know, like for example, Lynn McTaggart in all her work. I mean, that goes back to the, what 1980s, 1990s, and they had people sitting in Australia, I think, and setting the intention that the seeds in, petri dish A was going to grow taller than petri dish B in a lab here in the state of Arizona in the United States. So, and they did because they set that intention. And she's done a lot of intention experiments, and it just shows how everything is interconnected. And for those who have read Stephen Harry Booner's book, um, the heart, and how the heart, we connect with other things, whether it has a heart or not. And in his book, he talks about that. So we have a huge electromagnetic field emanating from our heart, and that's how we measure the EKG. But that also extends to other things, right? It extends to the animals, to the plants, to the trees. So I'm going to say there is a very deep awareness of that we are not living on the earth, but we are part of the earth. The earth itself is a living, it's living, and everything is in a symbiotic relationship with each other. The plants make the oxygen, we give them back carbon dioxide, right? Everything, we're all dependent. And that's, also why it's so important to take care of the planet, take care of the earth, because we are in a relationship with the earth. And if we don't take care of the planet, then we also make ourselves extinct. So it's a deep relationship, I'm going to say, with the planet and who we are.
What did your experience teach you about destiny versus free will?
I'm going to say it's a mixed bag. That's what I have come to, because I know I have worked with different astrologers over the years, and my first near death experience is clearly visible in my astrological chart. And I've been told that was to serve as a reminder of why I incarnated into this life. And all the angles and the planets themselves is like in a perfect alignment at that day, which is also funny because they sent me home 2 days earlier from the ER. It's like, no, we're not doing the not doing the NDE until Friday. It's only Wednesday. So right? And then the things I had to see or learn to, experience during those experiences, because I was such a materialistic person. I didn't believe in anything. And it had to be, I think, in stages in order for me to accept it. And also, the funny, your dad got to see relatives. Why didn't I get to see my relatives, my grandmothers and grandfathers? Because if I had, I would have completely discounted the experience. I would have said, oh, of course I'm going to see my grandparents. Of course I'm going to see all the loved ones in the spirit world, because that's what you would want to. You would want to see that. So I had to see things that I didn't believe to be true. And that's why, I don't believe in this, but this is what I experienced, right? So I'm going to say it's kind of like a double purpose there of having to experience things, but it's really interesting what happened after that. So I know that I'm a born medium. I know that now. And I've studied, mediumship at Arthur Findlay College in England many times, which is the renowned college of psychic sciences in the world. And they told me when I got there, they said, oh, you're not one of those people that come here just to learn mediumship or you want to be famous or anything like that. You're a born medium. And the funny part is that when I went there, I said, no, I'm not a born medium. And I'm not here to be famous either. I just want to learn about it. But now I understand, because then they said, oh, don't you remember when you saw the aura around your father? I'm like, oh, yeah, I do remember that. And don't you remember when? And I started remembering, yes, I did see energy fields and all those things as a child, but then you suppress it because, I even wrote about it in my book. I told my best friend, I said, do you see the energy field around the flowers on the kitchen table? And she's looking and she's like, no, what are you talking about? And this, you quickly learn to suppress that because you realize that other people aren't seeing what you're seeing, right? And you want to be accepted, you want to belong as a child. So so it was all there from the beginning, but after my near-death experiences, that's when it really got reactivated. And so I started seeing things and hearing things before they happened. And I also had a lot of classical after effects of a near-death experience. All my watches stopped. And my watch stopped like within a week after my first near-death experience. It took me like 9 months until I had the strength to even go inside a Target and get a new watch. I got a new watch, brought it home, and it was exhausting just to do that little tiny errand. And I wore it for about a week and it stopped. I was so disappointed. I said, oh my gosh, it was so much work for me to go like running a small errand. So I brought it back, talked to customer service, and I said, I don't know what happened. It just stopped. And they said, all right, go pick out a new one. I pick out a new one. I wear it for a week. It stops. I was like, why? Like, this must be something wrong. And I was a business major, remember, and as an undergraduate. So what is my thought? I bring it back to customer service at Target and I say, I don't know. This watch stopped too. They must have a problem in the manufacturing plant. It must be, like a quality control issue. So they're like, well, we haven't gotten any other watches back, but go pick out a new one. I said, I'll pick a different brand this time because obviously they have a problem with quality control. So I get a different watch, wear it for a week, and it stops. And then my friend comes over to help with laundry and dishes because I was just, still so weak. And I tell my friend, and she starts laughing. She goes, "It's not you, honey. It's not the watches, honey. It's you. You're the one that's making them stop." So after that, there was no watches for a while. And then after 1 year, the watch would tick for like a month. And after 2 years, it would tick for 2 months. When my child was about 3, I had like 16 watches in my in my drawer. And I always bought with a watch with a second hand because it was the only way I would know if it was working, right? So it's like, oh, second hand is moving. This one started working again, so I can wear that one for a few days. And I would just constantly rotate. And it took 12 years for my watch to take almost to the day 12 months. And I was like, that's it. I'm healed. And I looked on the computer and I said, well, my kids are teenagers now. I got to go back to work, but I can't go back and work in technology like I used to. It has to be in the healing arts of some sort. So I look on the website and on Google and I found a school and it says naturopathic medicine. I was like, wow, this sounds amazing. Like, it's a combination of kind of Eastern and Western medicine. You learn acupuncture, you learn botanical medicine, but you still learn pharmaceutical medicine. I was like, wow, that is so cool. And then I realized it was a real medical school. So I'm like, oh, I can't do that. I'm in my mid 40s. There's no way they're going to even accept me. And I was a business major. I don't even have any science classes. I have to start over. I have to do biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, the missing math classes. There's no way they're going to accept me. So I kind of frustrated, closed the computer, went to the kitchen, and the spirit world drops in. Now, the spirit world has been dropping in for 12 years, okay? So at this point, I'm completely trusting in what I'm hearing, because for 12 years, and we could talk about all the different things of seeing the future or hearing the future or seeing like remote viewing in real time. All those things have been going on for 12 years. And I had been writing everything down to make sure it wasn't a deja vu or that I was crazy or I made it up somehow, right? I was so scientific. So at this point, I know that when the spirit world drops in, I listen. And the spirit world said, no, you have to go to medical school. Though we still have free will, right? It's a suggestion that, no, this is the right path. That's why you found this. I'm going to say they showed it to me. So they said I have to go to medical school. I have to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And I've gotten that message, that exact message from 4 mediums, 2 in the United States and 2 in England. It's always my mom, and she comes in and she says, you have to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And it's always the exact same wording. It's very interesting. And my second book is in my head, which I would probably start writing in the fall. And they said you have to combine East and West, and you have to bring messages and healing to the people. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you mean writing a book? I've never written anything. And what do you mean bringing messages and healing to the people? And they're like, just enroll in the classes. And the fall semester was about to start like in 2 weeks. I literally got on the computer that next day. Everything was in order, and I was already asking for my undergraduate transcript. And I had to start from the beginning. I'm in my mid 40s now, and I had to start with high school advanced placement biology because I couldn't even get into the freshman biology. So I had to start from the beginning. I had to do all those classes, with all the regular younger people. I was like, could be their mom, right? My kids were the same age as the students. And then eventually, I applied to med school, and there's only 5 naturopathic medical schools, and I applied to 2 of them, and I said it's either going to be this one or this one, and I got accepted at both of them. And so when I was 54, I went to med school, and I flew through it. So for anybody out there who is afraid of going back to school, it is a huge advantage to be older. Don't be afraid of going back to school or changing your life. So I'm going to let you ask a question before I continue, because I'm sure you have
Sure.
questions.
I have notes. I didn't know that watch battery issues were correlated with NDEs, and it made me think my mom was born dead. Both of my parents have interesting stories, but my mom was born dead. She had the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck. She was completely like purple, so they needed to what's it called? The little electrocution thing.
Oh, like revive her with
whatever that thing is.
Neither of us can think of it. Yes, whatever that thing is.
We know what we're talking about.
Defibrillator or like
yeah.
They jump started her.
Exactly. She had to be jump started. But to this day, she can't wear watches because the batteries stop working. That's been one thing with her. When I was growing up, my family, I don't know what it is. I've never had a near-death experience, but I do, like with electronics, I don't get along with them very well. They will glitch, the batteries go out. That happens frequently. I would have electronics turn on a lot when I was a kid. I wasn't allowed to have them because they would play Hush Little Baby, even if they weren't programmed to. Too many weird things. But that's so interesting. I didn't think about that. And that made me curious. How did you teach your kids or like introduce your kids to this stuff? Did you? What was that process like?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. So my oldest son was 6 when I had my first near-death experience, and 8 when I had my second one. And my younger one was 3.5 and 5.5. Because I wasn't ready to speak about it, it was, I figured, if I start talking about this, people are going to lock me up in the psych ward. So I was afraid of speaking about it to anybody that, I wasn't a really close friend or a family member. And it wasn't until so it's my kids. It's so funny because my boys have the scientific mom. Everything was, I was still like scientifically approaching life, but my daughter got the hippie mom. So my daughter grew up with, we talk about chakras and energy and, the spirit world and all these things. So it's very interesting because they have such a different view on it. And, I'm going to say my boys are now in their 30s, right? So it's really, and all my kids are in their 30s. And it's really interesting to see them. They're slowly kind of coming around because they can see my work now and who I am and what I do. And they're like, wow, she was like that, when we were little too. But I wasn't talking about it. It was things I was reading, by myself or yeah, so it's really interesting because when you don't feel safe about expressing something, right, you're going to fall in line because it's more important that you belong and you get love back, right? This is the human nature is that we want to belong. So yeah, so it's really interesting to look back because it's they were raised very differently. The parents you have, they are on a journey themselves. So when you have a couple of kids in a household, there you're going to have one child that says, I love mom. Mom was so great. And another child says, mom was crazy. She never approved of anything. Two completely different views because you know what? Mom probably was very different because we don't know what she went through. She could have been sick when after she had her first child, or she could have had postpartum depression. Maybe she lost a parent when you were an infant and she just couldn't connect with you the same way she connected with another sibling, right? So we forget all those things that happened to our parents when we were little and what state of development they were at when we were at certain ages. And that all shifts. And we can see that in bigger families. Like I have three older brothers, and two of my brothers are quite a bit older. They're 14 years older and 12 years older than I am. And then my other brother and I are only 5 years apart. So it's like two litters. And we were raised very differently. Right. And it was in my family, it was just the era of when they were raised and I was raised. It was very different times. When my brothers were raised, my mom talks about, Dr. Spock and how we weren't supposed to pick up the children when they were crying and we just let your brothers cry in the crib. And she had, so many regrets of that later on in life. And of course, they're going to have a different outlook on life. They were just left to, like, nobody comes if I cry. That's what they learned when they were infants. What I learned was I cry, somebody comes and cares for me. Very different life lessons.
I'm an only child, and it's so interesting because I feel like I was raised very spiritual. This stuff was very normalized. So I was given the capacity to channel, and especially with my dad, just because of his background, he understood that a child could sometimes be wiser than an adult. So he was willing to listen to, whatever I had to say or come to me for advice and stuff. With my mom, it was a little bit more headbutting. I think it was a little bit more of an ego thing because, she is an adult, and there were many times. I think that's one weird thing about growing up very connected to energy is it's like my parents got divorced and she would date someone and I'd be like, this person isn't a good person. And then she'd be like, you're not my mom. And it's like, I know, but I see it and I know how it's going to play out. And then it plays out like that. It's so tricky, but as you're saying, I think it is so important for us to see our parents as people. We are all people. And I think the more that we can zoom out, of our issues and everything going on in our mind and in our bubble, you can start to connect the dots and even ancestral patterns, why they act the way they do, as you're saying. They may have gotten certain treatment from their parents, and then now they're learning a new way to do whatever, but they don't know how to do that. Both of my parents had abusive parents. It was also a different time, and a lot of that stuff was normalized, and it was extreme things, but that's just what you did. So coming into me, when I was a kid, they didn't know. Their parents for the first time. You don't know how to parent. You're figuring it out. You don't want to, repeat old patterns and whatnot. But yeah, I feel like that's such an important thing that is not spoken about as much. It's also interesting because as we age too, our relationship with our parents changes. What we expect from them when we're 5 is very different than when we're 18. but those big like milestone transitions aren't really talked about, and I almost feel like it would be very beneficial as a society if we just normalized having a conversation with our kids or something like, what are you expecting of me in this next cycle? You know, if they go into middle school and they're starting to be a little more social, do I need to baby you as much? Do you want more space? You know, I feel like kids hold so much wisdom. They come here with a purpose. They know who they are. They know what they have to do. And if we saw that more, I feel, and gave them a little bit more space to strengthen that muscle, I feel like there's room for a really beautiful collaboration.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love your perception of that. You know, because everybody sees their life through their own what I call rose-colored glasses, and it's the subconscious and the conscious mind, like what we made out of life, the expectations we had when we were children, and we go through life with those expectations, and then we have to change that perception as we go through life and say, I don't know, is this a good way of looking at things still, or do I need to change my perspective on this, right? And we go through, we change things all the time. You know, we used to might say, oh, well, I'm never going to drink milk because it's bad for you. But then we grow up and we say, you know, it's not that bad, that we were misinformed, right? So how many times have we seen, you know, we shouldn't eat eggs, right? Remember, I don't know if you remember these things, but like, we weren't allowed to eat butter. Butter would kill you. We have to use margarine, right? But now we've come full circle. So now everybody's saying, no, eat butter. It's much better for you, much healthier than margarine, right? Full circle. Same thing with eggs, same thing with meat, same thing with everything. And it's just this constant circle of, oh, this is bad for you, right? But I'm sure there are people that are still, you know, doing the margarine because they remember that, you know, back in the 80s or whenever we were supposed to eat margarine, and they're stuck in that perception. But we have to learn to change our perception as we go along, right? So because our needs change and our awareness change, our knowledge changes. But when you talk about like ancestral wounds, we carry a lot of things in our subconscious mind because those are the tapes that are running. Those are the tapes that we learned when we were little, right? And those are the hard things to break, but also in ancestral healing, which is where my life has taken me from after seeing the grid, because everything is interconnected and we are all interconnected as people, but we are not just interconnected to each other. We're connected to, you know, great grandpa in the spirit world. He's also part of the picture. What did he do? You know, what was his trauma back then? So when you look at, you know, now we know, for example, that trauma is passed down on DNA. So they've identified genes, like the FKBP5 gene was one of the first ones. And there's a great study actually that was published in 2013 in the Nature of Neuroscience. And they did, it was like ancestral odor fear conditioning. And it was a study that was done on mice, but it's a really good example of what happens. So they took male mice, and every time they smelled the cherry blossom smell, they'll give them a little electric shock. So of course the male mice is going to say, uh-oh, cherry blossom smell, watch out, here comes the electric shock, right? So they learned that behavior. Then they took the sperm of the male mice, artificially inseminated the female mice. So they didn't get to talk to each other, right? They just took the sperm, put it in the female mice. And when her little baby mice were afraid of the cherry blossom smell, they had never been exposed to it. They had never had an electric shock. They even had more M71 receptors, which is the receptor that smells the cherry blossom smell, so that they could detect the cherry blossom smell at even lower levels. Wow. So they were like hypersensitive to the cherry blossom smell. Now think of it, you know, we know that they've identified human genes of trauma that gets passed down on Holocaust survivors. And so, you know, to simplify it, let's say grandpa served in World War II, or great grandpa. And every time the sirens went off, he said, this is the day I'm going to die. You know, he takes shelter, and miraculously he survives. And now he has kids, and then he has grandkids. And his granddaughter, she is petrified. Every time she hears the siren, she's like, oh, she has panic attacks and anxiety every time she has a fire truck or a police or an ambulance. But she has never had an experience herself right? So she was never in a car accident. She was never in a fire. It's not her own experience that has made her afraid. She just has this fear of this. Where is it coming from? Well, grandpa passed that down. The fear is the survival. If you're afraid of the sirens, you're going to survive. I was afraid of the sirens. I took shelter. I survived, right? So when we think of it, it's a simplified way, but it's a good example when you look at the mice study, because all the traumatic events, I don't care what it is, gets passed down through the generations. Now, if you say, your mom and dad came from a difficult background and there was lots of issues there, but you didn't take all of it. Okay, let's say there's 100 problems. You took maybe 3 or 4 of those. Though you said, put them on my plate. I'm an only child. I can do 2 from mom and 2 from dad. I'll take 4, right? And those are the struggles you have in this life. And it could be, whatever it was that they weren't able to resolve. And sometimes that's relationships. Sometimes we see, I think it's just, it's like what Einstein called spooky action at a distance. I call it magic at a distance, because when you work with people, and like a common issue is people lose communication. So communication is cut off between mother and daughter, let's say. And I've had several of these. And there was one woman, she hadn't spoken to her mom in 10 years. We do an ancestral healing. When I do an ancestral healing, when I work one-on-one with people, we always end it with a 15 to 20-minute healing, and I call it soul communication. You don't have to do anything. You just close your eyes and come along. It's a guided meditation. I guide you on the issues that came up that are important in your life to resolve. And we do a soul-to-soul communication, whether the person is still alive or in the spirit world. It doesn't matter. We are all connected. And it's interesting what happens. So this woman, for example, who hadn't spoken to her mom in 10 years, like 6 months later, she comes back, I want to solve this other issue I have. And I said, how's it going with your mom? And she goes, oh, we're best friends now. We talk every day. All right. So, and the mom doesn't know what happened. And the same thing with other people. I've lost communication with my daughter. She's in her 30s. She's married. I don't know if it's her new partner but I've lost connection completely. And then we do an ancestral healing. And then 2 weeks later, I get an email, and she goes, you won't believe who just called me. My daughter called me. So what is that connection, right? But we all know we are connected. We all think of our friends. We have all picked up the phone and called someone, and they're calling you at the same time. Or you haven't thought of somebody in 6 months, and all of a sudden that person calls you, right? So we know we're interconnected, but we can't quite explain, how it works. But we know, for example, that the people who won the Nobel Prize in physics, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. You can look it up like on nobelprize.com or .org or something if you just search on it. But there were 3 physicists that won the Nobel Prize. And what they proved was that the particles are entangled. So they had 2 particles. So to make it simple again, let's say you have 2 apples at your house and I have 2 apples at my house. And we're really good at throwing the apples. So we're each throwing an apple from our house to the Grand Canyon, and a specific spot in the Grand Canyon in Arizona. And your apple lands right next to my apple. So they have now met. They're like, wow, hello, apple. And they're now talking to each other. They're sitting right next to each other in the Grand Canyon. The apple that you still have in your house and the apple that I have still in my house, they're now connected, because each of our apples were buddies with the apples we both threw to the Grand Canyon. They're now entangled, and this is what the physicists won the Nobel Prize for. They proved that particles are entangled. So it's really interesting, right? When the research is starting to catch up to what shamans have known for thousands of years, that we are all interconnected. We are all part of the earth. We're all part of each other. We are all one in the end. And it's literally the experience I had during my near-death experience is that we are all part of that grid. We each have, I call it a node. For those who are familiar with Indra's net in Buddhism, it's like we're all sitting in a corner of this net, and we all talk to each other. But everything I send out is also reflected back to me in different ways. But that's also what ancestral healing does, because we are connected to our ancestors' events and however they were. But not only that, we're also connected physically, right? Your nervous system is integrated into your parents' nervous system. When you're an infant and you're born, you can't regulate your nervous system on your own. You have to co-regulate with the adult, right? Which is why for all of the people that are listening that have an infant or have had infants or cared for an infant, if you're stressed, the infant, they know that. They tune into your nervous system. They are regulating their nervous system based on where you're at with your nervous system. So if you're stressed, you're thinking of all the things you have to do and all the tasks at work and the house and the laundry and etc. It's impossible to get that child to sleep because they feel your stress. And so as soon as you relax, you put on the calmest music and sing along, that baby's going to be asleep in 2 minutes. So, I'm sure a lot of people that are listening, that have infants, they've had that experience. But it's very interesting because there's so many parts of us, right? We got the super conscious, the consciousness itself that is integrated with each other. We're part of nature. We have our own lessons that we're learning in this life. So it's an integration of, how much free will do we have in the end? Well, what I'm wearing today, I chose to be on your podcast, right? All these different things. But when I look in my astrological chart, and I've been told over the years, my near-death experience is there. The person I had my children with are there. Lots of different types of experiences that can be seen in my astrological chart. So it's like a little movie script that's running in the background. I'm going to say it's like a loose movie script that we can adapt. But if we came to do something specific in this life, or you were supposed to meet somebody like your parents, I'm sure they were supposed to meet, and they were supposed to have you because you needed them as parents, and you needed to have that upbringing for whatever reason, for what you're here to do in your life, right? And then they're like, okay, contract's done. Okay, moving on. So I'm going to say there is no clear way of, how much is free will and how much is predetermined in one way or another, because I feel that a lot of the major events in our life are predetermined and they're not random. They were supposed to be like that. It's part of the reason you came into this life.
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of like our perspective, our feelings, what we do with them in the moment, we have control over. And sometimes that's the most important job. I feel like there's a fixation on what's going to happen and when, but whatever's going to happen is going to happen. That literally doesn't matter whether you are kicking back and enjoying the journey versus panicking. It's like that changes the experience exponentially. That's the most important part, not what's going to happen.
Yeah.
What would you say the
Yes.
difference is? Because this is very nuanced. The difference between like remaining loyal to tradition or honoring your ancestors versus carrying them or maintaining outdated patterns.
Well, we're here to make a change. We're here to make a difference. We're here to move the world forward. So I'm going to say it's a combination, and I'm going to say it's different for every person. I think some people are here to keep traditions alive in a different way, and other people's are here to let go. And I think we all have unique paths, and if we all have our agenda in this life, what we came to do. But in the end, we are here to create the balance, the yin and the yang of the earth itself. We're all part of the greater consciousness. And so, your role might be to keep traditions alive, whereas somebody else came here to be the inventor and bring in the new. So it creates a balance. In the end, it's all, a balance of who we are here on earth. It's like you have to keep certain things alive because we have to understand who we are and where we came from. But at the same time, we're also moving forward. So it's this constant evolution of who we are.
Yeah. How would you say someone can discern what their role is in a bloodline?
I'm going to say some people don't get to know what they came to do, and is a trial and error kind of thing. And that's just they incarnated to have that life. And what did they come to learn? Maybe they came to learn to not worry about those things, or learning to let go, versus other people say, well, I know I came for something, but what is it, right? So I have actually a session that I do that's called Messages from Spirit Guides, which often helps people when they feel like, why am I here anyway? I don't even like my job. I mean, it pays my bills, but I feel like I came to do something else, but I just don't know what it is, right? And I do a session called Messages from Spirit Guides where I quickly sketch the spirit guide that I see, and then I automatically know something about the person, because the type of spirit guide that you have is also related to who you are in this life, because they're like an expert at what you're here to do. So, and I'm going to say this is probably my most fun session. But we all have a reason. We all came for a reason. There's nobody on earth that didn't come for a reason. We all have a reason. And sometimes we just don't know what it is. Like, I didn't know what my purpose was until I was literally in my 40s, when I was told I had to go to med school, and then I still didn't know. And when I got out of med school, I was 58. I had this whole plan. I was going to be a medical director. I came from the business world. I was like, oh no, the spirit world, that's just, guiding me. That's nothing to do with me helping other people. That's just what that is, right? And then as soon as I graduated, I just taken my boards, like 3 days of boards. And I was having dinner with this woman. I was studying craniosacral therapy at the Upledger Institute. And we had dinner together, and she goes, I'm a medium. And I was like, yeah, right, you are. I was like so skeptical, even though I've been hearing the spirit world for 20 years. I was still like, no, you cannot tell me anything about my life. And she said, oh, somebody's here, and they're like very insistent. They want to give you a message. And I'm kind of thinking, she's not going to be able to do this, because my upbringing was so different. She doesn't know anything about, I grew up in Sweden. It's a different country, a different culture. So I said, okay, yeah, sure, I'm open. Go for it. And it was very clear it was my mom. I mean, there was no denying it. It was like, rowing the little boat and the fishing nets and the island, and my training at IBM and the management training, and all these different things came through in the reading. I was like, wow, okay, clearly it's my mom. And she said, you have to go to Arthur Findlay College and study mediumship. I'm like, I just got out of med school. I don't even have my license yet. I'm like the bottom of the totem pole in the clinic. Like, I'm the one who's going to fill in for everybody else. They can take vacation, right? I'm the little low life resident. So eventually, after several, evidence that came through, it was like, no, you have to go. I finally said, okay, fine, I'll go. And 6 months later, I was at Arthur Findlay College. And that's when the journey really began. And I mean, I went to England like 5 times in 2.5 years, I think. It was, and every time I went, they're like, you have to come back. You have to come back in 6 months. The messages were always the same. And it was like this rush, like you have to hurry. You have to be ready to step into it and work professionally by September 2019. And I was at Arthur Findlay College in March 2017 for the first time. So it was just 2.5 years. It was like very rapid development, but I had heard the spirit world for 25 years by now, right? So, but I always thought it was just messages for me. And so I stepped into working as a professional medium at a conference, and that was September 2019. And then 6 months later, we were in lockdown, and everything changed. And I started working online, and I started teaching mediumship. That was the beginning. And then, getting into working more spiritually. And now I've left the clinic, and now I only work online, and I only work spiritually with people. So I do a lot of work I also work as a medical intuitive, because I often hear diagnosis. I know what's wrong with people, even though sometimes I get the information before they get on the screen, or somebody will put in their notes, because I always ask. Sometimes I call it like a medical intuitive and wellness session. Sometimes people just want to pick your brain and get information about different things, and then anyway, so I work as a medical intuitive and kind of tune in. And sometimes I just read people's notes, and they'll say, I have all these allergies. And I'm like, no, you don't. This is what's wrong. And then they get on the screen, and I'm like, do you have this? It's kind of weird. And it's just different. And it's very different with different people. I think that to a certain extent, sometimes we're supposed to know or find out what we have, so we can change that trajectory. And sometimes we're not. because we're not supposed to get well yet. So I'm going to say there's something, it's what we incarnated to do. And I know in my astrological chart, somebody looked at my chart and I said, I was really sick for a long time. Can you see that in my chart? And they looked at my chart and they said, yeah, and you got well when you were 44. I was like, how do you know that? How do you know that I got well when I was 44? And they're like, oh, I can see it because all the planets changed when you were 44 and all this old stuff went away. And that's when you paid off your past life karma. So the karma, my past life karma in this life served as a purpose for me to be sick because I incarnated to be a healer and to work spiritually with people, but also to give them help to find the right treatment, right? So when I work as a medical intuitive, there are times when I have said to people, you need surgery, and I know where you live, even if sometimes it's even been in a different country, and I'll say, there's one surgeon in your country and he's in this city and they live in that city. I mean, it's the weirdest things. Like, what is that? That is divine guidance, right? If somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, this person, there's something to that. And many times people get on my screen and they're like, I don't know. I asked for guidance at 2:00 in the morning and I said, I need help. Find me somebody who can help me. And then you popped up on my screen on YouTube. And here I am, and it's like 2 days later, right? It's the weirdest things, but we're all guided. We're all guided that way. And I think that we don't realize it because, I was very scientific. I still am very scientific. And it's hard to trust it. And I'm going to say it was the hardest lesson for me was to learn to trust. It took me 12 years to learn to trust in the spirit world. So that everything that they told me was true, right? And I can tell you a funny story during the time when I was in residency and I was going back and forth to Arthur Findlay College. I'm in my kitchen. I was doing my residency up in the mountains, 2 hours north of Phoenix. And I'm about to drive down to Phoenix and I'm grabbing my car keys and my purse off the kitchen counter. And the message comes in and it says, watch out for the red truck. So I hear them say, watch out for the red truck. And I see a red truck swerving into the left lane, completely all the way into the left lane, and then back into the right lane. And in that image, because I get a lot of clairvoyant images, I saw the mountains in the background. So I know it was on the 17 heading down from the mountains, not the road I had to take for an hour to get to the 17 freeway. So as I'm on the freeway, all the trucks pass you, white truck, black truck, white truck, black truck. Eventually I come up on a truck and it's a red truck. I'm in the left lane, they're in the right lane. I have a car in front of me that's passing the truck. But that message said, watch out for the red truck because it was going to swerve into the left lane. So instead of just following the car like we always do, we just follow like a little pearl necklace. I sit behind the truck, give the truck plenty of space. I wait for the car to pass. There's a guardrail on my left, so I don't want to pass the truck. I have nowhere to go. I'm going to get squeezed if that comes true. But it's, been 25 years of this now, so I know it's going to be true. So I sit behind the truck and I wait for the car in front of me to pass. They're finally clearing the truck. And now they're finally one car length in front of the truck. So now if I step on the gas, I can pass. But as I'm waiting for a little bit more room, what happens? The red truck completely swerves into the left lane and then back into the right lane. I mean, at that point, I'm just like, thank you, all my guardian angels and spirit guides up there. Because, I mean, it's so extreme, right? But if any of you listeners get some weird message like that, please listen to it and I've had that happen. Good. Then I went back, I was in Phoenix and I was going back up to the mountains and, it's early in the morning. It's like 7 a.m. and I'm like in the bathroom, I'm washing my hands and I get the message, watch out for the accident. I'm like, what accident? I'm not getting anything. So watch out for the accident. I'm like, okay, get on the freeway and down in Phoenix. So now, it's like 5 or 7 lanes of cars, right? But it's early in the morning. So it's not that many cars on the freeway. I'm in the second to the left lane, not all the way in the left, second one in. And I see a car passing me, coming up on my right. And it's an old car and it catches my eye. And I was like, wow, that's an old, BMW or something. Somebody's like redoing it. And as they pass me, the left rear wheel comes off the car and shoots across my lane diagonally. And I'm just like stepping on the brakes, trying to not slide just as much as you can brake without losing control, basically. And literally misses my car by an inch. The wheel, I'm looking in my rearview mirror, lands off the side, in the on the shoulder lane. And the guy who steered the car, he managed to steer his car off onto the right shoulder. I mean, it was like a miracle. And I was, again, just, sweating, saying, okay, thank you, Spirit World. Because if I hadn't gotten the warning message or got to the accident, I wouldn't have been on the freeway going, watching every car passing me, like, what accident? What am I trying to avoid here? So I was so alert. I was watching every car, and then that happened. So, sometimes we don't realize, anybody who gets these warnings, please listen, because that could be your spirit guides, telling you to watch out.
Your story reminds me, there's a shaman that my dad and I were close with when I was a teenager. He was a doctor, very Catholic, just, fully science. He went to the Amazon on a trip, and there was a tribe or something like that was like, you're a shaman, come with us. And completely changed his trajectory fully into shamanism, was formally trained, stopped his medical practice. And as you're saying, it's kind of the combo. We get a breadcrumb trail when we're here. If he had known that he was meant to be a shaman this whole time, he wouldn't have had such a big pivot. And that pivot is so important because there's so much perspective shifting, wisdom, understanding, lessons. There's so much that comes from that. And I feel like when we get those little nudges, listening to, even with the accident stuff, it's not always about like, oh, here's a warning so that you don't get an accident or something. Sometimes it's meant to remind you of that divine guidance. It has nothing to do with the accident. Maybe even if you didn't know, you wouldn't have gotten into one. But having that moment creates such a special bond with the other side.
Yeah, I love that. It's that pivot that happens. All of a sudden, this is not working anymore, and I got to make a change. And it's so interesting, right? Because it's the calling of. It was the same for me. I had to close my clinic. I'm not supposed to do that in that way anymore. I'm supposed to be over here. And it's your incarnation. Do you know what life path number you are?
I do not. I think a 6 or 9, but I may be making that up. How do you compute it?
Oh, you add like your the day, the month, and the year you were born. So if you add my birthday is May 28, 1958. If you add all that up, you're going to get 38. And then 8 plus 3 is 11. And so I'm an 11 Master Life Path healer in this life. So if you don't know what it is, you should look it up. Because it's really interesting that you had two parents like that. What did you came to do? And sometimes when we look at our life path number, numerology, and our astrology, it becomes very, more apparent of who we are.
I'm 5.
Yeah, freedom seeker. Yeah, that makes sense for those parents too.
Very fitting.
Right? Yeah, right. You can look up your parents now and your mom. It's interesting, like what did they? It's very fun to look up because it's like saying, I was born in May, so I'm a Gemini. And when you talk to people that are, astrologers or numerologists, right? They're like, of course you are. Like, it makes perfect sense. Like the way you are, like, because they know everything about you because you're a Gemini. But it's true, right? You're a Cancer. We know, Cancer are the nurturing people, like, right? And then we have the Aquarius are what like the intelligent, and the Virgos have words for everything. There's just certain traits that sort of come along with your sign, and then all the planets on top of it, right? It's gonna make that sign even more different, because you're I'm a Gemini, so I'm steeped in that mold. I'm an 11, so I'm steeped in that mold. But you can get a lot of information about why you're here in the first place just by looking at that.
It makes sense that 5 is connected to freedom. I actually purposefully avoid astrology or like numerology because I don't like being put into boxes.
Of course you don't, because you're 5.
Yeah, it's very fitting.
Yeah, you're a freedom seeker. Forget anything like that. Yeah. Versus I needed confirmation. Am I really here to do this? Okay. Oh yeah, you are an 11. It is true. You are here to help heal the people of the world, right? And it's really funny, but it's also like part of being an 11 is like you have a lot of doubts about things in the beginning, and it's like a bit of a roller coaster. So it's really funny to learn about things like that because it gives you insight. If I say I'm a Gemini, they're like, of course you have a podcast. You're a Gemini. So astrologers look at you so differently because they have, this whole chart of you came from this mold, so you're going to have these traits and then blended with your uniqueness, right? But it's interesting. It really is because you can predict certain things. Have you ever met a Virgo that didn't have 1,000 words to express themselves? Right? So I kind of think it's funny because it's just who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So, and temperament wise, different signs have more of a hot temper because, oh, you're a Scorpio or Sagittarius or something, they're more quicker to react versus a Cancer is just like, oh, I just want to be nurtured,
I'm the
and
Cancer.
crawl into my little crab shell, right? So it's very different. We come, steeped in certain molds too. I think we're probably way more predictable than we think we are. And then we got mixed that in with our free will.
Yeah.
And our path, right? What we came to do. I mean, there's so many aspects of it. Nothing is black and white,
Mm-hmm.
And can you change everything? Of course you can. So, and why is it that some people will do all the meditations and all the work and they don't heal? And somebody else does all the work and all the meditations and they heal. What is that? Why is it that they heal and the other people don't? There's so many different aspects of who we are and what we came to learn and what it is that has to be resolved. So for one person, it might be, I'm going to attend all these workshops on meditation and nirvana, and I'm going to heal this. But for somebody else, it might be chemotherapy. And for somebody else, it may be ancestral healing. For somebody else, it may be straightforward counseling, right? Everybody has a unique path. So even though you have the same disease or the same issues, it doesn't mean that just because it worked for some people that it's going to work for you. So I tell people never put all your eggs in one basket. Divide them up. Try the different things. See what works for you.
There are different medicines for a reason.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to end, what is your favorite type of candy or treat?
My favorite type of candy or treat, I'm going to say dark chocolate salted caramel.
Ooh, I love dark chocolate. I like chocolate with strawberries, but particularly dark chocolate. Darker the better.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, taste change over life. When I was young, it was always milk chocolate, but then as I get older, it became dark chocolate. Our taste buds change too. And I used to love all the strawberry cream, all that stuff. Now it's like it's too sweet. I can't do it. It has to be the only filling I would do would be like a caramel, or it's just straightforward like salted dark chocolate. So it's interesting. We change as we go along.
I used to, for some reason, when I was really young, I've never really had much of a sweet tooth, but chocolate would make me so nauseous. I hated it. I could not have it. And then I started to get dark chocolate, and then it just kind of changed. I still can't do super sweet like milk chocolate. I don't care for, but I love dark chocolate very much. That's my favorite. Well, where can people find you?
They can find me on drlotte.com. So DRLOTTE.com. And same thing, Dr. Lotte Valentine on Instagram, Facebook. And you can also book a session with me on my website. I learn all about the different sessions, medical intuitive, messages from spirit guides, ancestral healing, etc. I do lots of different things. Sometimes I also teach. I teach for the Shift Network. I teach for the Theosophical Society. I teach my own courses. And the best way to stay up to date is to go and sign up for my newsletter. And we typically send a newsletter either once a week or once every other week. We're not the kind of people that bombard your inbox with emails every day, because I think that's very annoying myself. So I'm careful about what we send out. I try to make it just weekly or biweekly, so that it makes sense for people.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for your time, for your mind, for joining us today. As always, all of the links for Dr. Lotte will be in the show notes. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you have a fantastic week ahead. I am sending hugs, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you so much for listening to Diary of a Psychic Medium with me, Amber Amrine. To learn more about me, book a session, learn about my mentorship program, all that good stuff, you can visit channelwithamber.com. Follow me on Instagram at channelwithamber. Special thank you to Unicorn Heads for my theme song, A Mystical Experience. I'll see you next time.